It's the Gala Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi, and we are sleeping with the lions tonight. You talk about sleeping with the fishes, right? When you talk about the mob. One lady's husband, I guess former husband, missing millionaire husband, maybe sleeping with the lions, or I don't even want to talk about a digestif. We got a special guest this morning. Jerry Mitchell is with us. He is with the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting. And if you don't know who Jerry is, he has a great, wonderful, long history of incredible news reporting in his career. Remember the movie Mississippi Burning? He was very instrumental in that civil rights case, getting that involved. He started looking into that and realized that there were a lot of things going on in Mississippi that needed to be looked into during the civil rights era. And so he looked into that and really kind of busted it wide open. Jerry is with us this morning. Good morning, Jerry.
Morning.
How are you today?
Doing great.
So you're in Tampa, Florida. Is that correct? Are you still in Florida this morning?
I am.
You are.
I am in Tampa.
For folks that don't know, Jerry right now is investigating a storyline that came out of a Netflix documentary called The Tiger King. And The Tiger King is based upon wildlife preserves, particularly Joe the Exotic's wildlife preserve that was one time was down in Florida. And one of his nemesis, a woman that he went after, they had a bitter feud. I'm sure it's still ongoing since he's in jail now, in prison. But it was all about Carol Baskin. Carol Baskin also had a wildlife preserve, and she accused Joe the Exotic of many horrendous things. But Carol herself, Jerry, is kind of the topic of some interesting turn of events in there. Tell us a little bit about the missing millionaire husband.
Well, the millionaire husband who's missing is named Don Lewis, and he and Carol were married at the time in 1997 when he disappeared, and he hasn't been seen since. The presumption really is that he was met with foul play. His van was found at a small airport, supposedly with his keys at the floorboard. But anyway, it was found there shortly after he disappeared, and so and that's 23 years ago, and nothing has really happened since then. Like everybody else who was cooped up, I ended up seeing the series, and I've written about a few cold cases, and so the guys, the beginning of that segment, episode 3 says you don't solve 20-year-old cold cases, and I thought, well, actually they can be solved. So I took it kind of as a challenge and decided to dive into this.
Jerry, is it something that you immediately thought of when you watched this series, or is it something that you ruminated about and thought, you know what, now that I've seen that, I think I want to look into this?
Well, actually, at that moment in time that I saw it, I thought, well, why isn't this? This seems there's a lot of, kind of pretty powerful circumstantial evidence. A new will, a new power of attorney, basically came to light after Don Lewis's, and he already had a will and a power of attorney in place, and all of a sudden there's another one, and it was very fascinating. And then the signatures, what I have found out is that I gave the document to a handwriting expert here in Florida, and he basically said every single signature on those two documents is traced. Like there's not, in his opinion, they're just traced. They're not. Whereas, like if you or I write our signature twice in a row, they're going to be, differences.
A little different,
they're not
right?
going to be
Little
identical.
nuances.
Yeah, I mean, you can't write it twice, without, doing that. And the model signature for Don Lewis's hand, signature on both the will and the power of attorney appears to be his marriage certificate. And so it matches identically. So you've got the marriage certificate as the model, I guess you said, which was 6 years earlier. And a more recent signature of Don Lewis is pretty different. I mean, all of our signatures as well, over time, evolves as well. So all those things are intriguing, and she's the one that
Is
supposedly
there a question
prepared.
now about whether he was actually married to Carol Baskin? If you're talking about a signature,
No,
is
no,
there
I just mean
speculation?
that I just meant his signature.
His
Our
signature
signatures
itself,
evolve.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, he was worth about $10 million at the time. We're talking about 23 years ago. So in today's time, it's a lot of money, but back then it was really a lot of money. As you said, his adult children were cut out completely. Baskin got everything. So that's why the signature is so important, and whether or not this was a legitimate will. There's a lot of speculation as to what happened to him. Now, some say that he was, he did fly down to Mexico, I guess, to do business and to go down that way. I think he
Costa
had a
Rica,
girlfriend possibly
Costa
there.
Rica,
So one of
Costa
the
Rica.
theories is he was Puerto Rico. I'm sorry. One of the
No,
theories was he
no,
was thrown out of
Costa
an
Rica.
airplane. Costa Rica. I
Oh,
apologize.
that's what someone says. I
So
don't.
some say that. You don't believe that?
Yeah. No.
What is your theory on it from what you've investigated so far?
I think any speculation about, I don't think it's that much speculation to speculate he's been murdered. But I do think it's pretty rank speculation to, unless you have some kind of evidence as to what transpired. Uh, Thrown out of an airplane is a little tough. You've got to have a particular kind of airplane that has like a cargo bay or something like that. And my dad's a pilot, and so I know, when you're flying, it's not like you can open the door and throw a body
Right.
out. So yeah, I think a lot of people, obviously in the show, there's this whole thing about meat grinders and him being fed to the tigers and all that kind of stuff. I just seriously doubt it. I think if at least if you're being thoughtful about what you're going to do with a body, it's that doesn't strike you as what you would do. I think we're in Florida. There are plenty of gators here
Hmm.
and swamps, and you've got a gulf on one side and the ocean on the other. So I find it tough to believe you would. There's certainly a host of possibilities. Let's put it this way: a murderer's paradise. Florida is a murderer's paradise.
Yeah, yeah. You've watched the whole series. From what you've
Mhm.
investigated so far, what things have you seen that have either been left out of your investigation and what you're seeing that's the truth, and what things are maybe kind of made up? That you talk about her feeding her husband to the tigers. That sounds like that may be a myth. What are some other things that you've found that you think they stretched it a little bit with the producers on those episodes?
Um, well, I've been focused on Don Lewis's disappearance. I mean, in terms of just more details, necessarily anything, that's false or anything like that, but it's more like context and different things like that. I know far more now about, what was happening that weekend, and the fact that the executive assistant uh, for Don Lewis, and this is mentioned in the series. I mean, that she was really, by the time she got a hold, like she was trying to reach her boss all weekend, so she was trying to call all weekend and couldn't reach him. And this is back when you had pagers, and I remember those. I had them. I had
Hmm.
one of those, and so she was not just calling him, but she was paging him, and you used to be able to put I know my boss used to put 911 at the end of a page. That's how you knew it was an emergency page. You better
Hmm.
call back right now. And so they had the equivalent code of that, and he never called. So she was pretty frantic trying to reach him, and then when she reached Carol, the wife of Don, she was like, when she talks about it. It wasn't on the show, but it was on a podcast actually I listened to, and she was laughing about it and says she couldn't get a hold of Don. Ha ha ha. What does it mean you can't get a hold of Don? And but this was someone who worked very closely for him, so that was a surprise. So
Yeah,
yeah,
of
it's
course,
a
the will was a
fascinating.
surprise to her too. Yeah. We're talking with Jerry Mitchell today from the Mississippi Investigative Group, and very well known Center for Investigative Reporting. He is a legend in Mississippi. He's down in Florida investigating this cold case, something that intrigued him. Carol Baskin, whose husband went missing, $10 million went to her. I think she had a boyfriend in the waiting. We're going to talk more with Jerry as we continue the Gallo Show here on Cradle. We're talking about big cats in pens in animal sanctuaries. Have you seen the 8-part series Tiger King, Murder, Mayhem, and Madness? If you haven't and you have Netflix, it's worth checking out. Now, I'll be honest with you. When I first tuned it in, I wasn't planning on watching it, but everybody kept talking about it, and I like to be current. And I watched the first episode, and I thought, this is nothing. It's boring. I have no interest in giving that much time of my life to this series. Someone else said, make it through part 2. If you make it through part 2, you'll be hooked. And I thought, well, okay. So weeks later, I watched part 2, and sure enough, I was suckered in. And I spent the next, overnight until about 3 in the morning, binge watching the series because it is the most fascinating, crazy, wild ride of a network documentary. It centers on Joe the Exotic, who had an animal preserve down in Florida. He was known as Joe the Exotic for 20 years. He's now serving 22 years in federal prison for animal abuse and 2 counts of murder for hire. This guy, his story is so insane. He even ran for president in 2016 on the Libertarian ticket. Who was he hired to, or who did he supposedly try to hire someone to kill? We're talking about Carol Baskin. She's the CEO of the Big Cat Rescue, and she's one of the key characters in an investigation that Jerry Mitchell of our own Mississippi is down there reporting on to find out more about this cold case and what happened to Carol Baskin's husband, a multimillionaire who disappeared some 23 years ago. Jerry, this is, I think even if it was all made up, this is really a fascinating story. But the fact that a lot of these elements in the series are true, it really can kind of blow your mind, can't they?
Yeah, I mean, my summary of the shows is the documentary is essentially the story of the sane cats, big cats, and the insane people who keep them.
Joe the Exotic, for example, 2 husbands. He married 2 husbands at one time. So we got gay marriages involved. We've got murder for hire.
A gay gun toting, polygamous. It's you can't. The old term, you can't make it up. I mean, it's pretty wild. And then you've got people like Doc Antle, who's apparently, according to the series, got this harem, and a harem of women, and it's pretty wild. I mean, the show itself is pretty wild. I mean, I was really focused, like I said, when I saw episode 3, which is very much this cold case. That was really what intrigued me. I didn't care quite so much for the back and forth, the big war between Carol and Joe.
Who have you been able to talk with so far down in Florida? Has it just been research right now on the documentation, or have you actually been able to talk to some of these characters we see in the show?
Oh, I've talked to some of the characters that are in the show. I've talked to Ann McQueen, who was Don Lewis's executive assistant. I've talked to family members of Don. I've talked to people that knew both Don and Carol at length. And so those are the kinds of people that I've been speaking to. I will say in general that Carol made her share of enemies in the big cat world. I mean, that's pretty obvious when you begin kind of diving into that. It's a fascinating world, and that's the thing I like as a reporter. You don't really necessarily know that much about that world. Even if you see a documentary like that, it's very fascinating. You dive in, and you kind of learn the nuances of this. You kind of think, oh, well, these people want to, that side, part of the equation. You think these people really care about wanting to help animals, and you learn these little divisions within this little, this universe. It's very fascinating.
It's somewhat like a political campaign too, though. Even though they have a
Yeah.
love for animals, you have to raise money. You have what did they say? Was it $15,000 a month to feed some of these animals at one time? I mean, the costs are
Yeah. I think
incredible.
Carol said something like 125,000 a year that she had to have to feed the big cats. And yeah, and we see in the show, Joe Exotic, they're getting throwaways from Walmart,
Digging out
essentially
of
to
trash
feed the cat.
dumpsters. Yeah.
Yeah, dumpster diving at Walmart, and then the people there are so poor, that work for them, that they take the first go round with the food from dumpster
The
diving at
best of the worst,
Walmart.
right? Yeah, the meat. That was what vegetables and things. Okay, maybe but the meat, they were digging out the meat that is supposed to go to the
Oh
animals, and
yeah,
yeah, they lived in these the squalor, basically mobile homes and things that were rat infested, and so they put on this big air, which many in our world do. I guess we all put on a face a little bit, but that it's such a great career, and it's but the behind the scenes, it's really pretty. Uh, it's just really pretty sleazy when you look
it's
at it.
like a carny. I mean, this is what
Yeah.
Tiger King's like a modern day carny. That's what you kind of see.
I know that the whole focus for your investigation is on what happened to Don Lewis. You believe it
Sure.
sounds like that he was murdered. What happened to him? Joe the Exotic, though, is a pivotal character because that's kind of how this all
Oh
kind
yeah.
of transpired. Are you going to talk with him, or is it really not necessary to speak with him because he's going to he's going to be inflammatory? But do you want to talk with him, or is it not even on the table for you?
I mean, he's in prison right now. Not that you can't talk to people in prison. I've done it before. You can have conversations. I don't know what light he can shed. I mean, I think maybe there are documents he has or something like that. So those are the kind of things I'm trying to do is collect documents. And I don't know that he has any particular. I mean, he wasn't around, you know,
When that
in
happened?
'97 here in
Yeah.
Florida. So I don't know there's anything that he could add or have, like I said, may have documentation, but that would be it.
Jerry, you're on your own down there doing this. How long have you been there? How long do you plan to stay? And this has got to be expensive in a way. You're taking time to really look into this.
Yeah, it is. So if people want to contribute, please do. If you want us to solve the case, I'll help contribute. But yeah, I drove down here Tuesday. I'll be leaving Saturday. So just trying to talk to as many folks as I can while I'm down here, and it's been interesting. I have learned more things, and I really that's probably the area I've learned the most about is this kind of big cat world. People that and exotic animals generally. They certainly at the time that Don disappeared was I think exotic would be more accurate than just the big cats. They had a whole raft of birds and all sorts of various animals.
The Big Cat Rescue that Carol Baskin was the CEO of, is that still operating down there?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's still in the exact same spot, 12802 Easy Street in Tampa. So yeah, it's all right here,
Is it
and
even open now with COVID? I mean, that's the other thing is if these parks can't
they've shut it
reopen,
down
there's no
because of
money.
COVID. Yeah, they've
Yeah.
they've shut it down because of COVID, but you can certainly see it. You can walk. They've got a walking trail that goes right by it, and so I did that and just kind of you could able to kind of peer in and see what's going on in terms of where the animals are, and it's a big place. I think it's 40 acres.
It is fascinating, and if you haven't seen the series, take time. If you're stuck at home, take time to watch it because it is fascinating. Jerry, before we let you go this hour, I want to talk about the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting. For folks that
Thank you.
don't know what that is, tell us about that.
Well, it's a nonprofit we started. The idea is we want to, newsrooms are shrinking and even disappearing in Mississippi. And so we want to provide that kind of really deep dive investigative reporting that newspapers and other news outlets need. So we wanted to provide that. And so we started a nonprofit last year, opened our doors last year, and are providing that to almost all the major newspapers in Mississippi. Our stories have run on the front page of USA Today. They've run on The Guardian in London. They've run around the world, some of our stories. So that's what we continue to do. We're trying to provide that content that we as Mississippians need. So thanks so much.
Mississippi, tell them for folks that want to find out more about it. It's
Mississippi Center for
MississippiIR.org.
Investigative Reporting. It's MississippiCIR.org if you're interested in helping us out. Thank you.
Yeah, check it out. Check it out and read the stories, and also help support Jerry and his group. It is a dying art, and it's sad to see newspapers across the world die down in investigative reporting. Jerry, thanks for joining us this morning. So good to have you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You're listening to the Gallo Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. More ahead for you. Please stay.